Hello, fellow Megatenists! Before we get started, this is a remake of an old video I did in the Bone Age of this channel with a completely new script. I wanted to go over it again because I found more information and I'm also better at making videos than I used to be. I'm not deleting the old one so you can still watch it. I'll probably still put it in the description so you can see it if you want. That being said, let's talk about Megaten vaporware. Vaporware is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as software or hardware that has been advertised but is not yet available to buy, either because it is only a concept or because it is still being written or designed. Now, advertised is a term that we're going to be playing fast and loose with because, honestly, some could argue these games are simply things mentioned briefly and may or may not have been ever truly advertised. But don't be that way. That's not fun. You don't hate fun, do you? Regardless of what you think, we're gonna look at some lost SMT. For this video, I'm going in order from oldest to most recent. Imagine the 90s. Are you there yet? Pokemon, Monster Rancher, and Sailor Moon in the morning before you go to school. Are you afraid of the dark at night? Yo Mega Yo-Yos. Anyway, it's 1996, and the 1996 Volume 4, Issue 3 of GameFan had something very interesting on its page. In this full-page article, they give a basic rundown of Megaten with some very 90s writing. Here's an excerpt. Megaten's world is a weird one. The setting is present-day Japan, but the mood is a unique hybrid of Shadowrun-esque cyberpunkedness and ancient demonic lore. The game system is similar to Wizardry, almost entirely first-person, and with lots of enemy encounters. But one feature unique to the Megaten series is the ability to just talk to your foes. You can make friends, bribe them to leave you alone, or try to coerce them to join your party. Sometimes they'll even bribe you not to kill them. The article goes on to describe the beginning of Devil Summoner. What makes it very interesting is that they describe the intro exactly. The only thing that I would say is weird is that they refer to Karen as death multiple times. Most of the images seem to lack text, which is suspicious because the article concludes with the idea that the title could be coming in May of that year. The article was written in March! And you can clearly see this was a project they were working on because the logo is in English. This is before Persona and Last Bible 1 came to the West. Those were localized as Revelations Persona and Revelations Demon Slayer respectively. And Persona came to us in December 1996, whereas Revelations of Demon Slayer came out in 1999. This says to me that initially Atlus was going to just go with the Shin Megami Tensei name and might not have had Revelations in mind at all. The writer talks about sending us more info closer to release, and well, this wouldn't be in the video if it wasn't vaporware. Tracking down what happened to this release was a little tricky to the point I basically found nothing else outside of this article. If I had to guess, the reason this project died was due to the lack of popularity of the Sega Saturn, in the West at least. It was in direct competition with Sony at the time and the newly announced PlayStation, which hurt it by announcing a lower price point shortly after the $399 Saturn was announced, which, by the way, when adjusted for inflation, is about $755 for a console. I don't know what's more shocking, that price point or that level of inflation. In the end, the attention to the rather tiny Atlus USA had went to Revelations Persona. So, let's stay in the 90s, but let's go back 3 years. It's 1993, and it's weird. You're digging through the latest entry of Beep Mega Drive, the April appendix. Here you read about the upcoming Mega CD version of Shin Megami Tensei 1, and you're so impressed with what Sims is capable of. You're also excited to see what other things Sims has to offer because the appendix is all about Sims. Sims no Subite. The next big announcement, however, was something really crazy. This was the announcement for the game that would be called Deviliser. The magazine describes the game in the heading as such: warriors who stood up to prevent the resurrection of the Demon King. Deviliser. Deviliser is not the name of the Demon King, it's just what it says next. The page features a lot of content and it's amazing. We have the title screen, what looks like the story opening cinematic stuff, some battle screens, some kind of character selection screen, and another screen that looks like it's a stage select screen, meaning there are 4 stages: fire, water, wind, and earth. This first page has some very interesting tidbits. The text near the cinematic says that in 1999, the door to the demon world was opened by nuclear explosion. However, someone dropped a new type of bomb on the ground, and the world was plunged into war. On the left, it looks like it says, in 1999, Nostradamus' great prophecy will come true, and the great king of terror arrives. Text under one of the images says, "And the power of the new type of bomb cut through space, which became a door to the demon world. Spirits, weapons, demons, the options are perfect." So this is really just exciting to me. The premise is so simple but effective. It's reminiscent of SMT, but it's kind of different enough to be something else. Tying it together with the whole world-ending prophecy by Nostradamus is actually pretty cool. And at the time in 1993, I think this was a relatively fresh idea. The pages continue by saying, "How about turning the game introduced in the previous page, Shin Megami Tensei 1, into an action game? This proposal is what became Deviliser." And there's this bit of text under the character selection screen. It describes the characters. A human girl who is a spirit swordsman who can summon numerous spirits. A powered suit equipped with anti-demon armor and weapons. And the devil warrior who was driven out of the demon world to oppose the resurrection of the demon king. These are the 3 warriors you can choose from. Yes, there's 3 different characters of different backgrounds, but their goal of stopping the Demon King is the same. I gotta say that it's super interesting that they did this variety. It reminds me of Contra, or it reminds me of like Golden Axe, just like this very varied cast of characters, all with very different gameplay styles. The stages are based on the 4 elements of fire, water, wind, and earth. And when it's all cleared, I can't read the text, so I couldn't tell you what it says. At the end of each stage, a demon boss awaits you. The second page actually describes each stage, but it's really hard to read. I can only make out a couple of different words. The pictures from the blog are very poor quality in terms of that, and there's angles that cut off key information. But this is so intensely interesting. To summarize, this is an action game with 3 playable characters, 4 stages, and set in a similar setting to SMT. Seems like Golden Axe might be an apt comparison for how it would have played. This game seems to have gotten rather far into development, but as is the nature with these old things, the info is relatively sparse. This blog posted the images in 2008, and I have not found any more information about this, except Deviliser being on a list of cancelled Mega CD games. And worse, it did have a month of release, seemingly June of 1993. Honestly, I'm deadly curious as to whether the game was just reskinned or retooled to be something else. I had a lot of trouble finding the complete library of Sims work, so I don't know if there's another game that ended up being very similar to this. I also saw this blog state the code name for the game before the reveal was Majin Tensei. This is super interesting because the game that I've been talking about up to this point is not Majin Tensei as we know it. That was made by a completely different company, Multimedia Intelligence Transfer. And to be honest, that just makes me more excited because that tells me that some of these names that were outsourced to other companies might have been things that were shopped around. Maybe the reason for the name change was to distance itself from Shin Megami Tensei just a little bit, because nothing that I read in here really talks about Shin Megami Tensei. I don't see anything that looks like Shin Megami Tensei famous demons or anything. I'm assuming that there's more information in the interview that's in this appendix, but I couldn't read it, and that sucks. It was an interview with the then president of Sims, Mr. Shigeta. The notes mentioned that Shigeta said he wanted to do an SMT2 port for the Mega CD, but we know that also didn't happen. Since the video where I go over the information that I just read out to you, I did receive more info, including these images of the playable cast. The information that each character had like a guardian thing that would hover around them, and it was even discussed in a French magazine and an English magazine. Hopefully we get more info about this because I'm going to keep talking about it and digging around. But this is by far the most interesting thing in the video, so you can stop watching if you can stop watching, just stop. It's going to be boring from here on out. In 2005, there was a document released by Sony. This document featured games set to come out on the console, the PS3. This also went into the Tokyo Game Show of 2005, with 71 game developers set to make 102 new titles that were being planned or currently being developed. Because these are just tentative plans, there is no guarantee that everything listed would even be announced or released. Naturally, Shin Megami Tensei was on this list, and there's no information about what this game would have been. Yes, there was some Atlas titles for the PS3, and that included Catherine, the Persona Arena games, and Persona 5. Now, All of those games came several years after this was announced. However, Persona 5 did begin development in 2008, following the release of Persona 4. However, in 2008, that really was just prep work. They stopped working on it until 2011. All of this would make me think that this game was Persona 5, though the listing states Shin Megami Tensei series. This is very dubious and can mean a lot of things, but generally it's in reference to the mainline specifically. It is possible that this was in mention to Persona 5, but I don't know. The only really interesting thing I could find is not even 3 weeks after Tokyo Game Show, Atlus announced that they were canceling many games. Some of the things that were actually canceled I can pinpoint. Jam Jam Hype for the GameCube. Couldn't find any info on this, but it very much seems to be a sequel to the very unusual game Go-Go Hypergrind, which is a collab with the studio behind Ren and Stimpy. And yes, that loser John K seems to have been involved. X Jinsei for the PSP, that was also cancelled. Koro Q for the DS was also cancelled. And it mentions Shin Megami Tensei for the PS3 as something that they were actively developing, which I think is safe to say it was cancelled. If we don't assume this was a cancelled title, then it was probably Persona 5. Atlus was anticipating a loss of $6.15 million due to cancellations and a forecast of earnings of $211 million. I mean, why did they cancel these then? That article was from GameSpot and it had 2 comments and I thought they were both kind of funny. Atlus, if you're listening, the Megaten games are very much needed in this world of vapid game titles. If you must only think of money, so be it. Society is to blame. Oh well. And say it ain't so, Atlus. Just keep my Megaten games coming at least. It's always kind of interesting to see the responses from fans of the time. So I love Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, but there's actually a couple of lost versions. I don't want to go through them all in detail, but let's talk about them. It's not commonly known, but Nocturne did start development in 1994 before being delayed in lieu of working on Devil Summoner and Persona 1. So this one's a weird one because I've talked about it before in a video dedicated to Nocturne. I'll leave a link to that video in the description if you want to watch that, I think. But instead, I want to focus on a more commonly known version of Nocturne. A lot of this information comes from the Lost Media Wiki. In this version of Nocturne, Anat awakens Demi-Fiend to the power of Devil Hearts and tells him to kill Amaterasu. Demi-Fiend would then meet with Take Mikazuchi, who tells him that Amaterasu was cursed by Anat, and by her grief she hid in the monkey enclosure at the Ueno Zoo. He then tells Demi-Fiend that he needs to find the treasure to undo the curse on Amaterasu. You would then get 2 choices, either side with Take Mikazuchi and help save Amaterasu, or still go along with Anat's plan to kill Amaterasu. If you decided to help Amaterasu, Demi-Fiend would cross the waters of the Shinobazu Pond and meet Nue, which after negotiating, he would help Demi-Fiend navigate the pond. Demi-Fiend would then go to the bottom of the pond and find a tunnel in the cave. Once in, he would find the treasure and return it to Take Mikazuchi. He and Demi-Fiend would then undo the curse, and that demo ends. The other part of the demo is if you decided to stick with Anat's plan, Demi-Fiend would then kill Take Mikazuchi and find out that Amaterasu escaped to the Imperial Palace. By negotiating with demons, you would find out where that was, but there's a barrier in your path. Anat appears and breaks it. Then you fight Amaterasu, and once that's done, the demo ends. There's nothing that really says that this demo was intended to be the final story necessarily. It could have been just a really complex way of studying how to make Demi-Fiend move and deciding the look and feel of the game rather than actually being design elements that were intended. In my research for this particular topic, I did find several drafts of like old versions of Nocturne. None of them sound similar to what we get in this demo. There's also several cutscenes that don't really match up to anything that's in this demo. Again, I believe these could potentially be tests. After they finalized the story and everything, they kind of went into overdrive and pushed this game out in about 1.5 years or so. So it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of this stuff was just testing stuff while they were trying to figure out what to do because the story hadn't been designed yet. Hey, do you like yoga? Well, this was a stretch. No. In a now lost interview with the now defunct site Love to Game, Kazuma Kaneko was interviewed. It really sucks because this interview came right off the heels of the release of Rito 1. In roughly September of 2006, Kaneko is asked a question about where the next games in the Megaten might come to. Kaneko responded, the PS3 and Wii. In this interview, when asked what a Megaten on Wii might look like, he says, well, if you play Nocturne or Digital Devil Saga, they're typical modern RPGs. You see, characters act from a third-person view. But as you and your readers probably know, the original Megaten games use a completely different first-person point of view. I would love to go back to the basics with Megaten on the Wii, and bring back the first-person perspective, while using the controller to let players experience their environments directly. That sounds so cool. To use the Wii as a vehicle to explore first person and actually have the world be more interactable? Very, very cool idea. So not only does Kaneko bring back the PS3 up again, meaning that this was something that was intended and probably wasn't Persona, to be honest, but there was in fact the idea of a Wii SMT game. Now I keep saying this is a stretch because literally this could be just a harmless response. I have read hundreds of Kaneko interviews and I suspect he probably laughed while he said this, or said this in a playful remark type way, or maybe it was just straight up a joke. We don't know. This is another funny, probably joke one. This is towards the end of an interview with The Escapist. In promotion of Strange Journey, Eiji Ishida said this in response to a question about interesting technologies and what kind of game would they like to make next. I'm sorry to say, I can't disclose any information about our ongoing projects, but I'm personally interested in augmented reality technology. You go out, and when you see through a camera or even your own eyes, there's a Megaten demon on the street! I'd love to make a game like that. I heard there's a huge demon Beelzebub at the intersection of Shibuya. Let's go beat it! If we can get 100 people together, we can summon Metatron. We'll meet tomorrow in front of Tokyo Big Sight. Doesn't that sound exciting? Now, to be honest, SMT Go sounds very interesting. This is just another thing that I feel like was a thought experiment like the Wii game. There's other ones that happened like this where Kaneko mentioned maybe doing a racing game or sports games in the past. It was probably just a funny little thought he was having. I don't think SMT Go would work though, to be honest, because I don't think SMT is popular enough, even now, for Atlus to maintain such a costly endeavor. In 2011, Sony held a press conference where they introduced the roadmap for the Vita. It's really interesting because in the roster of upcoming titles was again, and I quote, the Shin Megami Tensei series. Now, we did get Vita Megaten. Persona 4 Golden did come out. Persona 4 Dancing also came out in 2015, and Persona 3 and 5 Dancing came out in 2018. This might be another instance where you think, well, Persona 4 Golden might have been the game that was mentioned, but no. In a document released the same day as this press conference, we got something really interesting. You can clearly see here that Atlus is set to make 2 RPGs, Persona 4 The Golden and something Shin Megami Tensei series. So there really was something. It's unknown how far this game got into development or anything. I think part of what made this kind of not work is that shortly in 2013, Atlus's parent company Index did go bankrupt, and maybe this is something that got lost on the cutting room floor, or maybe it just wasn't feasible once Atlus saw the sales figures for Vita games, you know? Because after this, we did see a big push in the 3DS world for Megaten games. And we saw this with Shin Megami Tensei 4, which came out in 2013, Apocalypse in 2016, Soul Hackers, Overclocked. I think that there is a chance that the game might have been Shin Megami Tensei 4. There's a chance that maybe that was something left. I have not read the design documents for Shin Megami Tensei 4. I do believe there's something mentioned in regards to that in the Megaten Maniacs, but who knows, maybe I'll have an update for this video about that. This one is one that's pretty confusing. In 2013, Atlus's parent company filed a trademark for Deviliser. I saw so much speculation regarding this. A lot of people just didn't know what it could be, but everyone kind of assumed that it must have been Megaten. I'm gonna give you my best guess. The gun-like comp used in Devil Children is called the Deviliser. This was the most basic version of the comp that you can use in those games. It allows you to summon normal, just demons. But there's another class of demons called the King class. These are just like better demons. To summon King class demons, you need to have the King Riser. Now, It's important to mention that these words have never been translated into English. I did find that the Deviliser toys did have the English for Deviliser on the box, but I don't know how Kinglizer is supposed to be translated. Something not exactly important, but is interesting, is Scion, a Megaten speedrunner, pointed something out to me regarding the Messiahriser. The Messiahriser is the big old strong boy that's the name of one of the Shin Megami Tensei Devil Children games. The thing about that is Messiahriser is a literal translation. He found that there is an official translation to Messiahriser for Megaten. It's Salvation. I'm not sure if this is a reference to Devil Children because the first game that uses this skill is Digital Devil Saga, or maybe it's just a reference to something that's hyper-specific in Japanese or a pun in Japanese. Regardless, Deviliser is likely to be a reference to the Devil Children games. But why did they trademark this? The last Devil Children title was released a few years prior, and unfortunately, that's where the trail dies. Again, this could be something that died because Index, the parent company for Atlus at the time, did file for bankruptcy in 2013, but we'll never know. The final thing is Shin Megami Tensei X Fire Emblem. This is a weird topic since we did get Tokyo Mirage Sessions. But let me walk you through this. In a Nintendo Dream interview for 2016, we got some insight to the development of the game that would become Tokyo Mirage Sessions. There was a lot of things that made this interesting. The initial plan for it being a 3DS title, the various genre shifts, etc. I want to directly quote the interview as translated by Nintendo Everything. At first I thought to the extent, let's create a strategy game. I like strategy games and Atlus games, so I think it'd be an excellent idea to create a strategy game with a world made by Atlus. I thought that Atlus's characters have perfect personalities and roles that would also suit Fire Emblem, so they're nicely compatible. When Shin Megami Tensei X Fire Emblem was proposed, I made a request to Nintendo that I'd like to decide on the most important element. After discussions, the request wasn't a keyword, Shin Megami Tensei, but rather, what kind of Fire Emblem would Atlus make? The first proposal was Shin Megami Tensei X Fire Emblem, but I thought it would probably be for the best to give Atlus freedom in handling the game. It's just a little less than 3 years ago when we started with the proposal. It is necessary to have elements that combine Fire Emblem to some extent, but other than that, let's be flexible and try various things. What kind of game did Atlus come up with at first? At first, we thought about a grid-based game similar to Fire Emblem. We discussed how strategy elements could be put in battles, but on the other hand, I told Atlus several times to be bolder, so they were having a bit of trouble. In addition to that, we also had various ideas like, shall we make a MMORPG? Things like tower defense? We also had a discussion about whether to do it on the Wii U or the 3DS. We even wrote a project plan for the 3DS once. At that time, Takada-san proposed, would an RPG be out of the question? I realized the request was, what kind of Fire Emblem would Atlus make? And our specialty is RPGs, so wouldn't it be nice to make one? However, I wondered if it would be alright when I asked about it. When I received the suggestion for the RPG, I thought, it was strange to ask a team that is known for RPGs to make a strategy game. Having seen the long trial and error up to that point, I thought it would probably be good to utilize their strong genre. Actually, Nakamura-san from Intelligent Systems, the makers of Fire Emblem, said this when we were having problems. If you're going to take the troubles, please create something Atlus-like that we can't do or even imagine. Those words gave a push to make the resolution. We also considered a battle system which was advanced guard and rear guard like Fire Emblem when the game turned into an RPG. But then one battle would take a long time and playing would get complicated. The weapon triangle should be the most important thing, so we'll be fine as long as we kept that. We believed Fire Emblem and RPG battles could be fused together if only a weapon triangle and class characteristics were included. So we finished it into the form it is now. So there's a lot of interesting ideas, a grid-based strategy RPG, a MMO, a tower defense, and eventually where they landed was a little weird. Shinjiro Takada, the director behind some Langrisser games, a tactical RPG series, as well as Devil Survivor, apparently suggested that they make an RPG instead, with Yamagi, the Nintendo producer, saying that it was strange to ask a team known for RPGs to make a strategy game. So somehow the logic that went into this combination of Atlus style and Fire Emblem style was not meshing, so they decided to defer to a typical Atlus outing. And I think that itself is a shame. It would be very interesting to see any of the older ideas. And to be honest, I know that this really isn't vaporware, but it's interesting to see that the initial fan interpretation of the teaser wasn't that far off from what they were trying to do initially. And that's all the vaporware that I know of. Let me know what your favorite vaporware was. To be honest, I know some of these literally just wasn't vaporware and just some of them were just one-off remarks, but whatever. It was in the original script, so I had to continue it. I want to shout out my channel members, Gavridius, A Lie Remains a Lie, and my fellow Megatennis tier channel member, FF12 Kid, who just hit 12 months of being a member. Bruh, that's crazy. Special thanks also to my newest channel member, Zorba the Prince. Please enjoy your stay. Like the video, comment down below to give that algorithm a boost, and subscribe to me. I also have merch for if you like my art and design skills, so you can check that out. Thanks for watching, and goodbye, fellow Megatenists.